Alright, guys, I believe we are live. So, this is my first stream ever. Now, I have no idea if I'm doing things right or if there's audio or any of that stuff. So, I'm going to just put my hands together and hope this is working. So, what this stream is basically me going through starting my journey with AI automations. I have been using AI for a little over a year now, and I have been just getting my feet wet with automations. And I came across, after going on a deep dive binge, Nate. And basically, Nate has this community here called AI Automation Society, and he put out an offer the other day for people to pretty much join a challenge that basically helps you build 3 automations, which are the sales agent, proposal agent, and the onboarding agent. Now, together, these 3 agents make up very integral systems for business operations in the modern era. And it's a pretty awesome challenge where, we can pretty much learn how to build these automations on N8N, which is a new software I'm becoming familiar with. And I figured that, hey, why not just kind of live stream the process of me doing this and documenting going from have no idea on how to build any AI agents to having 3 AI agents in my portfolio. So might as well just do this live. Now, the course is being drip fed over 2 weeks, and the way I plan to do it is to just today, November 4th, I want to get a really solid understanding of just AI and learning all this language, key terms, and just kind of like understanding everything today. So that's going to be the whole point of today's episode, is just piecing together the dots. So feel free to just kind of kick back and relax, and I'm going to be going through the videos, taking notes, sharing ideas, ahas, and epiphanies. And yeah, this is kind of like a inner looking on how I'm doing my workflows, all documented. So I already watched this one, but I wanna jump into this one here, data types. So I'm using Notion. Notion is probably my favorite tool to just record notes and stuff. I'm pretty good when it comes to organizing data, learning data, synthesizing data, and just applying data. So it's going to be interesting. So let's just kind of jump in. This is like new for me too. Like, I've never recorded one of my like flow sessions or like learning sessions. So this is like going to be weird. Yeah, we'll just kind of see how it goes.
Types within N8N, or just in general types within N8N, or just in general data types. So it's an important thing to understand up front because there are some complications that could arise in your workflows if you're getting certain errors or if things aren't moving through correctly. So just wanted to sort of set up the foundations here with data types in case it's sort of a new concept to you. So in N8N, data flows through workflows in a structured format, and often these are represented as JSON objects. So a whole another section will be kind of about JSON and how to understand the key value pairs. It's really not too difficult once you look at it. And after watching this video, it'll probably make more sense as well. But the core data types that you're going to be encountering are strings, most of all, which are just text. Strings are words, phrases, paragraphs, but this is just basically the different distinctions of how the computer understands what type of data is flowing through. So if it's a string, it's going to be text. Then we have numbers, pretty self-explanatory. Numbers are, there's a lot of ways that they can be sort of distinguished, but the main two you're going to see are integers and floats. Within N8N, you'll really just see it as a number, but an integer is going to be a whole number, and then a float is a decimal. It stands for like floating point number or floating point decimal or something, but a float's a decimal, and an integer is a whole number. Then we've got Boolean variables. So this is when a key could be set to either true or false, or like yes or no. Basically, there's only one or the other answer. So it's pretty black and white. Boolean is true or false. Then we've got arrays, which are lists of information. It could be, we have an array of products. So it would be product 1 is this, product 2 is this, product 3, blah, blah, blah. But that's an array. And sometimes those can be kind of confused with objects because objects are also sort of like almost like a list of things, but rather than just being product something, product something, product something, product something, an object is like a container of different key value pairs. So I'll show an example down below, or we'll look at what it actually looks like in N8N, in JSON, in the schema format, whatever it is. But sometimes sometimes arrays and objects can be a little confused. So we'll break that down. And then finally, we have nulls, which also can be confused with, I probably shouldn't have wrote empty values here. Let's change this to values that don't exist. So there's a difference between something that's null and something that's like an empty string. So we'll look at that as well. But just some important things to keep in mind. So we're just going to break down each of these data types, define them real quick, show an example, and then we're going to look at in N8N. When you're looking at inputs and outputs, so you've got your node in the middle, on the left you've got your input, on the right you've got your output. You can select different ways to view this data. So you've got your table view, which will be like, I don't know why I didn't include a picture of it, but anyways, your table view will kind of just be like a table. It'll look like Google Sheets with your headers up top and then your values and your rows and all that kind of stuff. Then we've got what I have down here. This first one right here, this is JSON, and then this one is the schema view. I like to stick in schema view typically because it makes the drag and drop really nice and easy. It's easy to sort of like have arrows for like collapsible items, so you can collapse things and get around to where you need to be. So I like schema, but sometimes you want to flip into JSON or table depending on the use case. Anyways, here we have two strings, right? We have the key here is a name, and then the actual value of the name is a string called John Doe, and then the email, which is john@example.com. Here's what it comes through as JSON. So as you can see, I talked about key value pairs, where the key is sort
of, and this is crazy too, because like I have absolutely zero experience really with modern day coding. You know, I don't even know if C# is a language, or if it was, or if it is, but I think there was a class in high school I did forever ago. I don't even know if that's accurate, but no coding language whatsoever going into this.
Sort of like if you were thinking about an Excel spreadsheet, you've got your columns, you have your fields. So the fields are those headers basically, and then your actual values are all of the cells that are within that column that have meaning. So the key's name, the value's John Doe, and as you can see, it's in quotation marks. It's in quotations, it's purple, so we know it's a string. And then similarly on the right side, we know it's a string because the schema shows that there's an A next to the field called name. So the A is a letter, so that just means that this data type is a string. Okay, so now we have number. The number is obviously numeric values, integers, floats. Here we have age equals 30. And then in the JSON that we get this pulled into when we're
pretty simple though, it's not that complex.
Using numbers in N8N, there's not going to be quotes around it. So as you can see, age is just 30. The key is age, the value is 30. It's green, no quotes. And then on the right side with the schema view, we would have a pound sign, which kind of represents numbers. Okay, so then from there we have Boolean. So I was just in a set node and I was setting these different things. So up here I set name to John Doe and I pushed it through as a string. Here I set age to 30, pushed it through as a number. And now I'm setting the field is active to true. And so when I set the type of data I want this to come through as, and I choose Boolean, as you can see, we have a drop-down menu of only two options, true or false. We couldn't enter anything in, so we couldn't type in true. We couldn't type in false. We have to actually select these two checkbox items. And we can see in the schema view that this is going to be a checkbox, rather than like a letter for a string, even though true looks like it could be a string. As you can see on the left-hand side in the JSON, there's no quotes around it. So that's how we can see that this is a Boolean variable. And a lot of times it'll just make sense, like is active, has subscription, is it an adult or is it a child? True or false, that kind of thing. So now arrays. Arrays are lists of values like I talked about earlier with the products. And here's a list of products. In this case, we have tags. So lists can be any data type. So as you can see here, we have tags, which are we put through as AI, automation, and N8N. And those will be shown within within square brackets. So when I'm setting this in that set field or the set node, I set the value, the key to tags, and then in the value section, I had to put two square brackets, and then I had to put commas in between each of the list items. And then it output this as AI, automation, N8N. And it's important to notice here in the schema, we've got a list, and you can see this is where I talked about the collapsible. You could bring these all up if you didn't want to see them all, but you can see it's coming through as one item. Even though it may seem like we have three items because there's three tags coming through, it's just one item because the item is the array. Within the array, we have tag 0 is AI, tag 1 is automation, and tag 2 is N8N. And then moving on to objects. So like I said, it can be confusing because they look similar because it's basically like one item where you can collapse it up or down, and then there's going to be more items underneath. But the difference here is that we have key value pairs rather than just tags. So within the object called user, we have an ID, which is 101, a name, which is Sarah, and an email, which is sarah@example.com. So here we have, our number variable or data type, and then two string data types. Same thing over here, a number, two strings, all within that user object. And once again, it's one item because the item we're counting here is the object. And yeah, I hope that you can understand this difference. These are all tags and they count up, and these are key value pairs. So each one's kind of different.
Okay, so that makes sense. It's like these are individual, if I'm understanding this correctly. There's like a data type, right? So a string, number, Boolean, array, and an object. Object makes up like these, I believe, if that's how it's being explained.
So that's objects versus arrays. Then moving into null values. So null means that it's like, I'm gonna get rid of empty. So null is missing data. So in this case, we were looking for someone's phone number. It wasn't provided, so it literally comes through in the JSON as null in red. Not a string, null, no quotes. Same thing in the schema view, it comes through as null with the two square brackets around it. But if you push it through and you just set something to nothing, like in this case, I set the key phone as a string and I just didn't fill in value and I pushed it through, what we get here is an empty string. So this is as you can see, two quotation marks around nothing, which means it's just an empty value. And then in the schema view, we're not getting the word null back. We're not like up here when this is actually a null value, we're not getting that down here in schema because it's just an empty string. So Hopefully you don't have to deal with that issue too much, but when it comes down to like setting routes based on does this field exist, in this case, yes, phone does exist, and so it would get pushed through. And because if you wanted to filter out responses where there was no phone number provided, this would get filtered out if you set phone equals not exist, route them off this way. But technically here, the key phone and the value does exist because it's an empty string. So just got to watch out for that. So as far as how data types impact workflow logic, not diving too deep into here, just wanted to give a good understanding of what they are, the differences between them. Boolean values can be really useful for if nodes when you're checking conditional logic. Arrays will help with like looping through things. So if you've got a list of 17 different topics you want to do research on, you could sort of loop through each item in that list individually. Numbers are useful for calculations, of course, and then objects are good for like structured data storage. So user details is a great example. If you had a webhook of form responses coming through and you had different objects for each response, and it would have, in this response, we've got name, this, email, this, phone number, this, form submission, this, and then you have that's object one. And object two is a whole different person with all those different key value pairs. So final thoughts is always inspect your data in the output panel when it's coming through. You may run into times where you're trying to send data between different workflows and you might get an error like expected an object but got a string and that kind of stuff. So that's why you want to be aware of data types and how they're coming through. Use the right operators in your if nodes. Convert types where necessary to avoid unexpected behavior, sort of like the error I just mentioned. You can use these different nodes to clean and format your data. And obviously the function is the legacy name. So basically set encode nodes to clean and format your data and your data types, and then test with different inputs, empty, null, numbers, text to ensure robustness. And then one more final thought too, of course, is just like be aware of null / actually just an empty string or an empty value. So like zero. If it's a number form, if it's a number data type and something's coming through as zero, so like let's say how many sales did we have today? 0 or null. Like that's going to make a difference. Even though they both technically represent like nothing, it's a big difference in the actual world of data, 0 versus null. So just keep that in mind. Hope this helped. And if you want to look at this PDF, it'll be attached into this post as well. So
Interesting. So it basically seems like this is like a communication idea, right? Like you're pretty much taking like these elements here, the data types, and like kind of just understanding like how the communication works. Yeah, and if at any point in time you guys are like, oh yeah, like I've never heard of this before, or hey, like I've seen this before, I know what he's talking about, like feel free to like drop some stuff in the comments. I'm be curious to see how you guys are intercepting this on this journey with me. But I think I got the sense. It's like there are data types, data flows through workflow in a structured format, represented as JSON objects. Core data types. Boom, that's kind of self-explanatory. I think it's going to be better when I see this like in action, but I'll remember this. Like this will be good to have. So, all right, bang, that's done. Now JSON.
okay, so in this one we're going to be talking about JSON. So by the end of this video, you'll understand how you can code agents with JSON.
I wanted to do more like writing in the Notion, but I don't know, man. I don't want to like over optimize do these videos. I kind of just want to bang through them. I feel like I've done this so long, guys. Like I've countless hours. Like I just can interpret data, and then the way I look for stuff is like I'm a big picture thinker, big picture learner. So it's like I like to just dive in and just get a thorough understanding of the stuff, and then there's like that stickability component where I'm gonna go through this stuff and then boom, like I only plan to just kind of go through this, and then the sales agent just kind of like setting this stuff up. I'll do it live, but I just want to like there's like 2 weeks to accomplish all of this, so like I'm going in understanding, but like I really learn by application. So I think there might be a space or time and place to go through this with a fine-tooth comb, but I'm just trying to catch that bigger picture, right? And then apply that bigger picture to the project at hand. So I think the quicker I can just kind of download this information, and then it's like I can go back and reflect and be like, okay, this is the data type that I need to know. This is what's happening inside of like the actual builder. So just kind of thinking out loud there. So let's jump into this next one, and if there's anything that stands out, I'll like write it down. But yeah, that's why you see that on the left there.
I'm just kidding. We're not gonna. Okay, so in this one we're gonna be talking about JSON. So by the end of this video, you'll understand how you can code agents with JSON. I'm just kidding. We're not gonna learn how to code. JSON may sound intimidating, but it's really, really simple. And that's the idea of this video, is just to get you familiar with, first of all, what JSON is and understanding why it's important to understand.
Also, his notes are pretty good too, so it's nice to just have some of those already thought out. I'm gonna have this here more for just like a reference of like, okay, yeah, this is the data types, this is what they're for. And then what I can do too is also just link this for the data types. It'd be good to have just kind of building the database as we go of knowing about what there is to know about. So JSON, here we go.
And like I said, it's really, really simple. The way that I like to think about it and how I learned it was I just think about filters, as in when you are ordering food online or you're ordering clothes online, you can have filters. You know, like what restaurant do you want it from? What side do you want? Or what color do you want? What size, what style? It's just filters. It's really, really simple. And the reason why it's so important is because it is the universal standard for internet communication. So when you want to build an agent that talks to Gmail, that's JSON. When you want to build a system that researches information, that's going to be using JSON, both in what type of request you're sending out and then the data you get back. That's all going to be JSON. And so it stands for JavaScript Object Notation.
See, now I wanted to get the slides. These slides, I guess you said, were made by AI. Really great slides. I want to definitely capture some
super simple to understand. And the good news about it is if you don't understand what you're looking at, you can just give it to ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, whatever you want, because it's so universal that all of these models were trained on it so well and they understand it so well. So it's nothing to be intimidated by. This video is going to be super high level, but by the end of it, you should understand what you're looking at and how to read JSON really well. It's super easy. So why does it matter? Like I said, it is the universal exchange of data. It's simple and readable. It's lightweight and fast, and it is the foundation of automation. Without knowing what you're looking at when you see JSON, you will not have a great time automating things. So like I said, it's filters, and it's super, super simple. You just think of it as key value pairs. So if you looked at this, you could tell me exactly what this is telling us, right? It's telling us that a person, their name is Sarah, their age is 28, and the city they live in is New York. That's super simple. It's English. It's basically, hey, here's the key, and here's our value. So your key could be, or I guess let's say mine would be name, Nate, age, 23, city, Chicago. It's that simple. The reason why it looks a little bit intimidating sometimes is because you have these curly braces that have to like wrap it up, and then you've got like colons and commas. But it's really easy, right? So the key is always a string in double quotes on this left-hand side. It always has double quotes. The colon separates the key from the value, and then the value can be any data type. So right here, we have a string, and strings are wrapped in double quotes. Right here, we have a number, no double quotes. Right here, we have another string wrapped in double quotes. Okay, so I know I went a little fast there, but we will be looking at this a little bit differently. And also, you would have just came from a video watching data types in general, so you understand like what a string is, what an integer is, what a Boolean is, and now we're just kind of talking about how they're represented differently in JSON. So like I said, a string is enclosed in double quotes. So we've got first name is John, double quotes. A number, which is an integer or a decimal, will not have quotes. So if you ever see, let's say 25 right here was wrapped in double quotes, that means that the computer or the agent or the service thinks that this is a string. And so sometimes you could have numbers coming through as a string. For example, sometimes dates come through as strings, like April 19th in double quotes, that's a string. Or 2025-9- whatever, that could also be formatted as a string. And so being able to just understand, okay, there's no double quotes, so the computer knows it's a number. Not going to get too technical here, but that's important because let's say you wanted to add together or you wanted to take the average of everyone's names. You cannot take the average of strings. So you may be getting an error and you would, okay, I need to convert all of these ages to numbers and then I can take, I can do summarizations or calculations with it. So hopefully that's resonating. Booleans are, they look like strings, but there's no double quotes and you'll typically only see true or false. So if you ever see true or false with no double quotes, it's a Boolean. Then we have nulls, which will also just be no double quotes and it will literally just say null. So that's super easy. And then where it gets a little complex is when you think about objects or arrays. So an object is when you have a big list of key value pairs and they're wrapped up by curly braces. Like we saw up here in this example, this would be an object. And in that object, we have the name, which is a string. We have age, which is a number. And we have city, which is a string. And that's all in one object that represents this person. Now that's an object. In your object, you could have strings, Booleans, numbers, all of them. You could have whatever. But now you have an array. And in an array, it's an ordered list of values. So you could have a shopping list. And in that array of shopping list, you could have apples, bananas, grapes, meat, potatoes. Or you could have an array of numbers. You could have 1, 2, 5, 7, 12, 1, 6, and that could be an array. It's just a list. And that is represented by square brackets. You could have an array within an object as well. So that's why it may seem like it gets complicated, but once again, if you can't look at it and read it and understand it with natural language, copy and paste it into chat and say, what am I looking at? And it will tell you exactly what you're looking at. You can even say, hey, define which ones of these are strings and which are numbers. It'll tell you. So here are some real world examples. Right here, what do we have? We have an object. And we know it's an object because curly braces. Within this first object, which is the order ID here, we have a string. And there's numbers in it, but there's double quotes around it, so we know it's a string. Now, what you see here is we have an object within an object. So we have an order ID, right? And then we have a customer object because these values relate to a customer. So first name relates to customer, age relates to customer, and is premium member relates to the customer. We have a string in Emma, we have a number in 29, and we have a Boolean in true. So hopefully that'll make sense. Just let it kind of soak in there. Different data types, objects can be in objects. There can be arrays in objects, all this kind of stuff. Now here we have an item list. And in this item list, we have a object. We've got a product name, which is headphones. We've got a quantity, which is 1. And then we have a price, which is this number. We also have the order total. And so this would be a list of different items that we have, as you can see. So if that didn't resonate or click, or you don't feel like you've mastered JSON, that's fine. This was just to get you kind of like a prerequisite to going into this course about automation, where then when you're looking at it, you at least understand what's there.
Sure.
So it's really important to understand for AI automation, because as you transfer variables between nodes, we make requests to different services, you'll be using JSON, like I said. So retrieve data, process data, take action, all going to be using JSON. For example,
I know he's still going, but I'm just want to voice my thought. It's like, I don't know if you ever learned a new language, if you ever done Duolingo or like anything like that, but the way that I'm kind of gathering it, and like I said earlier, there is no experience whatsoever with any sort of coding, but it seems like this is just like packaged instructions, is like how I'm looking at it, right? Like big picture. It's like, okay, yeah, you got strings, numbers, booleans, nulls, objects, arrays, whatever you want to call it. The way I'm interpreting this is a communication framework of transferring data, something like that, instructions. But yeah, we'll carry on.
Let's say you're setting up an HTTP request, which there'll be a video after this about APIs and what HTTP requests are at a high level. But basically, let's say I am having my agent send a request to my CRM. This is basically saying, okay, Mr. or Mrs. CRM, here's what I want you to do. The action I want you to take is the create user action. Here's the user data. It's an object of this user. This person is named Sarah Davis. This person's email is sarah@company.com. That was my user data object.
Banger.
Now I have a notification object. In here, I'm saying, okay, send welcome email, true or false. We're going to say true. And so basically in natural language, I would be telling you, hey, go create a user in the database for Sarah Davis, her email is sarah@company.com, and then send her a welcome email. That's all that's going on right here in this JSON.
Nice.
Now, once we send that off, if I told you to do that as a human, you would probably come back and say, okay, I made the user, here's the ID, the next steps are to do this. And that's exactly what the service sends back. Okay, success equals true. User ID equals here. The message is that user was created. And we have our next steps, which are this is a list, by the way. You can see this is an array. There's 2 next steps. Send a welcome email and then add to calendar. So hopefully that like real example makes sense of the way that we send it and receive it.
See,
and
that's
what we're looking at.
I wonder here, and maybe I'll figure this out sooner. Maybe he'll mention it, but it's like next steps for the array, right? Send welcome email. Like, what is that connected to? Right? Like, I wonder, like, is that an instruction? Because like you said, you're telling a human, but it's like, what if you're telling the AI, send welcome email? Is that going to need to be connected to something? Add to calendar. Like, where's the calendar? I'm sure like this will be addressed, but this is just what I'm thinking, because next steps, like, sure, do the action. Here's the data, notifications. Yeah. Well, hopefully that'll be answered.
So the rules, just to come back to later, there are certain little tiny things that will break your JSON. If you have double quotes used wrong, it will break. If you have trailing commas, it will break. If you have certain comments, it will break.
Yeah, just like English or any sort of language. It's like if you are spelling the with a Z, like obviously no one's going to interpret that correctly. So yeah, it'll be accurate with your prompting.
Unique keys, you can't have 2 of the same keys, and you have to have proper nesting. And I just wanted to highlight this because JSON can be frustrating and confusing if you get a message that says, hey, that's not correct, or hey, this doesn't work. Because there's tiny little things that will break it. All you need to do is copy and paste your JSON into Chat or Claude or Gemini and say, hey, my JSON's not working, what's wrong? It'll say, oh, you missed a comma here, or you missed a space here, or you have a double quote here. So it's really, really simple. And when I have my JSON breaking, if I can't identify right away because I see a comma or whatever, I'll drop it in the chat and I'll ask, and then I bring it back into N8N. So hopefully this gave you a good understanding of JSON and makes you understand just not to be intimidated by it. The more you look at it, the easier it'll get. The more you use validators, like literally if you go to JSON validator, if you type that in Google, there's tons of websites that help you validate it, or you can use ChatGPT or Claude, and then just start building. Throughout this challenge or throughout the course that you're taking, it's going to make sense because you're just going to start to see it more. And it's all about reps. It's all about exposure. When I first got into JSON and API requests, API calls, I wanted to cry. I remember looking at the computer like, what is this? And now it's like, it comes right away. I don't even have to think about it twice. It becomes a second language. So
yeah,
if you guys are feeling like that right now, a little bit overwhelmed, you're almost there. Just keep climbing. You'll get there. And then it's all downhill after that. Thanks for the attention. I'll see you guys in the community.
Let's go. All right. Yeah. And there's all these notes here too. So I think the gist is starting to come together. It's making sense. We're chucking along here.
Okay.
APIs in HTTP. See, now this is where I absolutely am lost, man. I know there is an API code or something. You guys are going to see my ignorance towards APIs right here, right now. I know, and I'm trying to just throw this out there. It's like, this is what I know now. And then one day when I look back at this, I'll laugh because I'm like, I'm going to learn all this stuff and it'll just be funny. But API, the way I interpret it right now is like, there's some sort of connection to a large language model or like some sort of access code or something that I don't know if that's even right, but there's an API system or process that you have to do. And I'm just saying this before I jump into the module. API, I don't even know what it means. Application Programming Interface. Okay. And how it enables systems to communicate. Got you. Okay. HTTP request access the voice. Okay, so there's communication and voice. All right, that's pretty simple. Send and receive data. Okay. So it's like the connectors. I see. Okay, let's
The scariest thing for beginners, and when I got started, what was the scariest thing to me was APIs and HTTP requests. And I'm going to today, at a high level, we're going to talk about what they are and how they work. And then later on, when you go to set up your first one in n8n or Zapier or Make or whatever you use to send off your HTTP requests, will be much easier.
Hopefully.
There's all these things you might see like API keys, header authentication, JSON body. It's intimidating. I completely hear you. I remember, like I said in the JSON video, that I almost started just crying because I was like, what is this? But it's really not too bad. You just have to get over that hump. And I just wanted to say that because everyone feels that way when they first look at API documentation. But anyways, we're going to get into it today because it's the most important thing to learn. Without APIs, you can't really do anything because API stands for Application Programming Interface. And it essentially allows two different software applications to communicate.
Gotcha.
So imagine I'm trying to talk to you. We can't see each other. Okay, so we're both blind, deaf, and can't feel. How would we communicate? We wouldn't. So if something has an API, that basically means they can see, they can hear, they can feel. If they don't, then there's really no way to talk to it. And so when things have APIs, and you can use an HTTP request, which would be like my voice or sign language or me touching you, that's my HTTP request to your API. So that's the way to think about it. And we're going to visualize it. It's going to be easy. But essentially at a high level, if you ask me what's an API in one sentence, I would say it allows two services to talk to each other. So that could be n8n talking to Gmail. That could be Gmail talking to Claude. That could be n8n talking to HubSpot. It's just, they're just talking. And they use JSON to talk, by the way, just so we all know. Anyways, so an API is a protocol, and it standardizes the way that things talk to each other. There is some hidden complexity, but they're digital connectors. You can see these two monitors are shaking hands, they're talking. I don't want to explain it that way because that's confusing. So I like to use this restaurant analogy, where you're the customer, the waiter is the API, the kitchen is the server, the food is the response. And that's a little confusing to think about, but I want to visualize it. So this is a lot easier way to think about it. So we go to a restaurant. This is us right here. When we go to this restaurant, we know that we want food. The restaurant has different options of food that we can get. And so in order for us to understand what we can get from the restaurant or the kitchen, we have to look at the menu. We look at the menu first, and then we talk to the waiter. So we tell the waiter, hey, I looked at this menu, and it looks like you guys offer chicken parm. So I have looked at this menu, and I'm going to tell the waiter, hey, I want the chicken parm. The waiter's going to say, okay, cool. Let me tell that to the kitchen. So it takes our request to the kitchen. And then the kitchen says, okay, the person ordered chicken parm. I'm going to grab chicken parm. And now I'm going to give the chicken parm back to the waiter. And the waiter's going to give the chicken parm back to the person.
Got you.
So without us looking at the menu, we wouldn't know what food to request. They might not have it. And without the kitchen giving us back the food, we wouldn't get it. So let's say we requested something that they didn't have. We requested, something up here. And there's nothing up here.
Nothing.
So then the waiter would come back and say, hey, that's not there. Maybe read the menu again and try again. Okay. So just to put this into a little bit more technical terms, let's say we have an AI agent, and the agent wants to get data from our CRM. So this could be the person's name, the person's email, the person's phone number. In order to talk to the CRM and get the right data back, it has to read the API documentation.
Okay, let's just go back. I want that screenshot. That's a banger analogy, Nate. Great one. Okay, let's get this out of here. And then there was this one too. That was a pretty great analogy. Just kind of like absorb this. That's a great way to think about it, honestly.
I want data, let's just API documentation. Lets our agent know what to tell the waiter or the HTTP request. So the agent says, okay, I want data, let's just say this is data A, and this is data B. The agent read the menu and said, okay, Mr. HTTP request, I want data A.
That's the waiter.
HTTP request says, okay, Mr. Endpoint
Kitchen.
or the server. The user or this agent wants data A. The endpoint grabs data A, brings it back, gives it to the HTTP request, and the HTTP request gives it back to our agent.
Boom.
So it's reading and understanding what is available, giving it to an HTTP request to give it to the server, and then the server gives it back to the HTTP request, which gives it back to us.
That's it.
So high level, I hope that visualization
that
worked.
was banger.
After this, I'm going to plug a video where I kind of dive into this process, but also I start to show you guys like how this works in n8n at a very high level, and connecting to one in n8n, which is really simple, the way you read the documentation and then you put it in, and you have like your API keys and stuff. But this is agent 0. This is the beginning. This is just getting a high level understanding. Okay. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
And these are all over. Weather apps. Your phone, when you look at the weather, it's basically sending a request to the Weather Channel or to Apple Map or Apple Weather or whatever you use, and then it comes back. And if you type in, okay, right now I'm in Chicago, cool. What if I want to see the weather in LA? I will type in LA, which is sending a request to the weather server. It's getting LA's weather and sending it back to me. So that's an API. Social login. You go to a platform and you log in with Google, and you're sending a request between those two services.
Okay, so I was completely wrong about APIs, but all right.
PayPal. You're on Etsy, and you want to pay someone with PayPal. You're making that request to PayPal server, and it's coming back, right? So APIs are everywhere. It's the magic that powers services to talk to each other. Now, don't get too hung up on this, but there's different elements that go up into your requests. You typically have an endpoint, which is basically what restaurant do I want, or what service am I trying to talk to. That's usually the endpoints, as you can see here. API.weather.com, current. This is the destination, and then this is the endpoint. So let's say I want it to McDonald's. This would basically be McDonald's, and then this would be like fries. So you're just kind of specifying what you want. The method, get, post, put, delete, you're pretty much using post most of the time. Every once in a while you use get, but I hardly ever use put and delete. So I'm not going to dive into this right now, but there's different methods. Headers is going to be your API key or your password. So when you go to McDonald's and you make that request to McDonald's and you ask for fries, you have to pay. And so you give them a credit card. And that's basically an API key, a password, something that says, okay, this person has this money here, or this is this person's account. We will then authorize them to use our service or to buy our French fries. And then you have a body, which is kind of like extra information. So maybe I want them extra crispy. Maybe I don't want salt. Maybe I'm gluten-free, whatever. Just sending over more details on the body. And once again, we will actually apply this and we will actually set up requests later. This is just high level. Now we send something off, the server retrieves it, and the server returns a response, and then we see it. It's just that process happens every time. Actually apply this and we will actually set up requests later. This is just high level.
Okay, we'll just take it over.
Now we send something off, the server retrieves it, and the server returns a response, and then we see it. It's just that process happens every time. And then we usually get back from the server a JSON response. And we kind of looked at this earlier in the JSON lesson. But once again, let's say I said, okay, I'm on my weather app and I type in Chicago. The server would get back a response that says, okay, location was Chicago, temperature is 72, conditions are sunny, humidity is 45. And then it would just display that in a nice looking way for us. But the server is actually getting back JSON. Once again, we talked about authentication. This is for security, access control, usage tracking, and billing. So when you go to a server, you'll typically get an API key to set up. And that's why it's unique to you. And so that's why on YouTube, I won't show my API keys, or if I do, I'll delete them later. So you guys couldn't just run me dry of my accounts with my money, stuff like that. Just think of it as a unique password that gives you access to your billing information if the service isn't free. So don't share your API keys. You wouldn't share your password, don't share API keys. And just to wrap up, why is this important? It lets us link AI to systems or systems to systems. It lets us access real-time data, because without real-time data, it's going to be horrible. We can have triggers. So we can have webhooks or things in different events. We can have things automatically trigger things. So on my old website, for example, this is my old website, Up AI. Let's say I went to get started and someone fills out a form because they want to work with me. As soon as they hit submit, this would basically send a request to my n8n workflow, and it would capture name, email, project details. And n8n workflow would put it in a database and shoot me an email, like stuff like that. But it's because I'm able to link them and have this triggered from one source to the other. It's consistent protocol, standards, so that chat models can help us, I can help you, everyone understands how to set this up, and then for scalability. So the bottom line is, understanding how to set this stuff up gives you unlimited abilities in n8n or Make or Python, whatever you want to use. You have to understand APIs in order to make scalable systems that work. Sure. So once again, if you feel like you still couldn't go to a website, read the API documentation, and then set up an n8n request, that's fine. But now you understand these pieces, and you understand how it works, which is that was the takeaway from this lesson. That was the goal that I had set up for you guys after the end of this 10-minute video. So thanks for the attention. I will see you guys in the community.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing really, is understanding those connector pieces. Definitely have a better take on APIs now. I think this was like a really great analogy, and I'm thinking of it as such. So it's like there's connectors, communicator, the voice, the language, and then there's obviously like data pockets of stuff that's being transferred. So pretty cool stuff. Now I think this is seemed like he put this in a very linear format. Like, okay, this is very well handpicked on what needs to be done. So let's see. So if HTTP is the voice, let's kind of see. This is him going to be on the n8n platform. So let's see what this one's all about.
If you're building AI agents but you don't really understand what an API is or how to use them, don't worry, you're not alone. I was in that exact same spot not too long ago.
I don't know either too. Like, if I can watch YouTube videos on a stream, I don't know what is right and what is wrong. So hopefully I can do that, or even just do this. But yeah, so let's see how this goes.
I'm not a programmer. I don't know how to code. If you're building AI agents but you don't really understand what an API is or how to use them, Don't worry, you're not alone. I was in that exact same spot not too long ago. I'm not a programmer, I don't know how to code, but I've been teaching tens of thousands of people how to build real AI systems, and what changed the game for me was when I understood how to use APIs. So in this video, I'm going to break it down as simple as possible, no technical jargon, and by the end, you'll be confidently setting up API calls within your own agentic workflows. Let's make this easy. So the purpose of this video is to understand how to set up your own requests so you can access any API, because that's where the power truly comes in. And before we get into end-to-end and we set up a couple live examples and I show you guys my thought process when I'm setting up these API calls, first I thought it would just be important to understand what an API really is. And APIs are so powerful because let's say we're building agents within end-to-end. Basically, we can only do things within end-to-end environments unless we use an API to access some sort of server. So whether that's like a Gmail or a HubSpot or Airtable, whatever we want to access that's outside of end-to-end's own environment, we have to use an API call to do so. And so that's why at the end of this video, when you completely understand how to set up any API call you need, it's going to be a complete game changer for your workflows, and it's also going to unlock pretty much unlimited possibilities. All right, now that we understand why APIs are important, let's talk about what they actually do. So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and at the highest level, in the most simple terms, it's just a way for two systems to talk to each other. So end-to-end and whatever other system we want to use in our automations. So keeping it relevant to us, it's our end-to-end AI agent and whatever we want it to interact with. Okay, so I said we're going to make this as simple as possible, so let's do it. What we have here is just a scenario where we go to a restaurant. So this is us right here, and what we do is we sit down, we look at the menu, and we look at what food that the restaurant has to offer. And then when we're ready to order, we don't talk directly to the kitchen or the chefs in the kitchen. We talk to...
I feel like this is very similar to what we just saw.
in end-to-end and when you would use one and when you wouldn't need to use one. So here we have two examples where we're accessing a service called Open Weather Map, which basically just lets us grab the weather data from anywhere in the world. And so on the left, what we're doing is we're using Open Weather's native integration within end-to-end. And so what I mean by native integration is just that when we go into end-to-end and we click on the plus button to add an app and we want to see like, the different integrations, it has Airtable, it has Affinity, it has Airtop, it has all these AWS things. It has a ton of native integrations. And all that a native integration is an HTTP request, but it's just like wrapped up nicely in a UI for us to basically fill in different parameters. And so once you realize that, it really clears everything up, because the only time you actually need to use an HTTP request is if the service you want to use is not listed in this list of all the native integrations. Anyways, let me show you what I mean by that. So like I said, on the left, we have Open Weather Map's native integration. So basically what we're doing here is we're sending over, okay, I'm using Open Weather Map. I'm going to put in the latitude and longitude of the city that I'm looking for. And as you can see over here, what we get back is Chicago, as well as a bunch of information about the current weather in Chicago. And so if you were to fill this out, it's super intuitive, right? All you do is put in the Latin long, you choose your format as far as imperial or metric, and you get back data. And that's the exact same thing we're doing over here, where we're using HTTP request to talk to Open Weather's API endpoint. And so this just looks a little more scary and intimidating because we have to set this up ourselves. But if we zoom in, we can see it's pretty simple. We're making a GET request to Open Weather Map's URL endpoint. And then we're putting over the lat and the long, which is basically the exact same from the one on the left.
I think that's my super power advantage here is like I'm really good at pattern recognizing, so when I see these things, like I remember him mentioning these commands.
And then as you can see, we get the same information back about Chicago and then some weather information about Chicago. And so the purpose of that was just to show you guys that these native integrations, all we're doing is we're accessing some sort of API endpoint. It just looks simpler and easier, and there's a nice user interface for us rather than setting everything up manually. Okay, so hopefully that's starting to make a little more sense. Let's move down here to the way that I think about setting up these HTTP requests, which is we're basically just setting up filters and making selections. All we're doing is we're saying, okay,
he's saying that, remember? The other ones, he doesn't. That's cool.
Access server X. When I access server X, I need to tell it basically what do I want from you. So it's the same way when you're gonna order some pizza, you have to first think about which pizza shop do I want to call. And then once you call them, it's like, okay, I need to actually order something. It has to be small, medium, large, it has to be pepperoni or cheese. You have to tell it what you want, and then they will send you the data back that you asked for. So when we're setting these up, we basically have like 5 main things to look out for. The first one you have to do every time, which is a method. And the two most common are gonna be a get or a post. Typically a get is when you're just gonna access an endpoint and you don't have to send over any information, you're just gonna get something back. But a post is when you're gonna send over certain parameters and certain data and say, okay, using this information, send me back what I'm asking for. The great news is, and I'll show you later when we get into end-to-end to actually do a live example, it'll always tell you to say, is this a get or a post. And the next thing is the endpoint. You have to tell it like which website or which endpoint you want to actually access, which URL. From there we have 3 different parameters to set up, and also just realize that this one should say body parameters. But this used to be the most confusing part to me, but it's really not too bad at all. So let's break it down. So keep in mind when we're looking at that menu, that API documentation, it's always gonna basically tell us, okay, here are your query parameters, here are your header parameters, and here are your body parameters. So as long as you understand how to read the documentation, you'll be just fine. But typically the difference here is that when you're setting up query parameters, this is basically just saying a few filters. So if you search pizza into Google, it'll come google.com/search, which would be Google's endpoint. And then we would have a question mark and then Q equals and then a bunch of different filters. So as you can see right here, the first filter is just Q equals pizza. And the Q is stands for query parameters. And you don't even have to understand that. That's just me showing you kind of like a real example of how that works. From there, we have to set up a header parameter, which is pretty much always going to exist. And I basically just think of header parameters as, authorizing myself. So usually when you're doing some sort of API where you have to pay, you have to get a unique API key and then you'll send that key. And if you don't put your key in, then you're not gonna be able to get the data back. So like if you're ordering a pizza and you don't give them your credit card information, they're not going to send you a pizza. And usually an API key is something you want to keep secret because let's say, you put $10 into some sort of API that's going to create images for you. If that key gets leaked, then anyone could use that key and could go create images for themselves for free, but they'd be running down your credits. And these can come in different forms, but I just wanted to show you a really common one is, you have your key value pairs where you'll put authorization as the name, and then in the value you'll put bearer space your API key, or in the name you could just put API underscore key, and then in the value you put your API key. But once again, the API documentation will tell you how to configure all this. And then finally, the body parameters, if you need to send something over to get something back, let's say we're making an API call to our CRM and we want to get back information about John, we could send over something like name equals John. The server would then grab all records that have name equal John, and then it would send them back to you. So those are basically like the 5 main things to look out for when you're reading through API documentation and setting up your HTTP request. But the beautiful thing about living in 2025 is that we now have the most beautiful thing in the world, which is a curl command. And so what a curl command is it lets you hit copy, and then you basically can just import that curl into end-to-end, and it will pretty much set up the request for you. Then at that point, it really is just like putting in your own API key and tweaking a few things if you want to. So let's take a look at this curl statement for a service called Tavily. As you can see, that the endpoint is api.tavily.com. All this basically does is it lets you search the internet. So you can see here, this curl statement tells us pretty much everything we need to know to use this. So it's telling us that it's going to be a post. It's showing us the API endpoint that we're going to be accessing. It shows us how to set up our header. So that's going to be authorization, and then it's going to be bearer space API token. It's basically just telling us that we're going to get this back in JSON format. And then you can see all these different key value pairs right here in the data section. And these are basically going to be body parameters where we can say, query is who is Leo Messi. So that's what we'd be searching the internet for. We have topic equals general. We have search depth equals basic. So hopefully you can see all of these are just different filters where we can choose, okay, do we want 1 max result or do we want 4? Or do we have a time range or do we not? So this is really just at the end of the day, it's basically like ordering DoorDash. Because what we would have up here is, like what actual restaurant do we want to order food from? We would put in our credit card information. We would say, do we want this to be delivered to us? Do we want to pick it up? We would basically say, do you want a cheeseburger, no pickles, no onions? Like what are the different things that you want to flip? Do you want a side? Do you want fries or do you want salad? Like what do you want? And so once you get into this mindset where all I have to do is understand this documentation and just tweak these little things to get back what I want, it makes setting up API calls so much easier. And if another thing that kind of intimidates you is the aspect of JSON. It shouldn't, because all it is a key value pair, like we kind of talked about. This is JSON right here, and you're going to send your body parameter over as JSON, and you're also going to get back JSON. So the more and more you use it, you're going to recognize like how easy it is to set up. So anyways, I hope that made sense and broke it down pretty simply. Now that we've seen like how it all works, it's going to be really valuable to get into end-to-end.
You know what this is reminding me of? It has me thinking like how, like I said, not coming from a coding background here, but back in the day when I could only imagine like coding was so hard. I bet like, you had to really study it and like know it and then like learn all of this stuff, and then boom, like all of a sudden now we got like AI can just write the code for you. It's really cool seeing this in its element, because right now you have to still write these codes, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'll soon realize that you can have these prompts communicate, and you can just like pre-populate them somehow. But it's so interesting to me how the age and the day and age that we're in right now, like you still have to, like the coding, like the advanced coding has taken like another form, right? Like because it's like the automations need the coding. It's like, when you're building the software or building the website, you have to code it, but now it's like you have to code these automations in a language, JSON. It's just so interesting, like having, this perspective on it. It's like really cool, because I can only imagine one day in the future where there's probably going to be a software that comes out where all of this stuff, just like how, what ChatGPT did to coding, that there's totally going to be a software one day where you click some buttons and automations are already made, and then, the automations are preloaded. Like I'm making a future prediction here, right? Where it's like, there's probably an app or a software or something, if not already, where it just makes it so much easier to just do this stuff without having to really think about all this intricate coding and details and language and stuff. I'm sure it's going to be more streamlined, but for now, this is where we are. This is what we're learning. Just understanding the building blocks that make up what an AI automation is in 2025.
I'm going to open up a API documentation, and we're just going to set up a few requests together, and we'll see how it works. Okay, so here's the example. I did OpenWeather as native integration, and then also OpenWeather as an HTTP request. And you can see it was like basically the exact same thing. So let's say what we want to do is we want to use Perplexity, which if you guys don't know what Perplexity is basically kind of similar to ChatGPT, but it has really good like internet search and research. So let's say we wanted to use this and hook it up to an AI agent so it can do web search for us. But as you can see, if I type in Perplexity, there's no native integration for Perplexity, so that basically signals to us, okay, we can only access Perplexity using an HTTP request. And real quick side note, if you're ever thinking to yourself, I wonder if I can have my agent interact with blank. The answer is yes, if there's API documentation. And all you have to do typically to find out if there's API documentation is just come here and be like, Gmail API documentation, and then we can see Gmail API is a RESTful API, which means it has an API and we can use it within our automations. Anyways, getting back to this example of setting up a Perplexity HTTP request, we have our HTTP request right here, and it's left completely blank. So as you can see, we have our method, we have our endpoint, we have query, header, and body parameters, but nothing has been set up yet. So what we need to do is we would head over to Perplexity, as you can see right here, and at the bottom, there's this little thing called API. So I'm gonna click on that, and this opens up this little page. And so what I have here is Perplexity's API. If I click on developer docs, and then right here I have API reference, which is integrate the API into your workflows, which is exactly what we want to do. This page is where people might get confused and it looks a little bit intimidating. Hopefully this breakdown will show you how you can understand any API doc, especially if there's a curl command. So all I'm gonna do first of all is I'm just gonna right away hit copy and make sure you're in curl. If you're in Python, it's not the same. So click on curl. I copied this curl command, and I'm gonna come back in end-to-end, hit import curl, and all I have to do is paste, click import, and basically what we're gonna see is this HTTP request is gonna get basically populated for us. So now we have the method that's been changed to post. We have the correct URL, which is the API endpoint, which basically is telling this node, okay, we're gonna use Perplexity's API. You can see that the curl had no query parameters, so that's left off. It did turn on headers, which is basically just having us put our API key in there. And then of course we have the JSON body that we need to send over. Okay, so at this point what I would do is now that we have this set up, we know we just need to put in a few things of our own. So the first thing to tackle is how do we actually authorize ourselves into Perplexity? All right, so I'm back in Perplexity. I'm gonna go to my account and click on settings, and then all I'm gonna do is basically I need to find where I can get my API key. So on the left hand side, if I go all the way down, I can see API keys. So I'll click on that.
See, this was what I was saying earlier. My previous knowledge on API, it was like, okay, yeah, you go to like Perplexity, ChatGPT, or whatever. There was an API key in there. That was my only understanding of it. But I can see how, with an automation, yeah, like you need to have it communicate.
It's going to do is this shows my API key right here. So I have to click on this, hit copy, come back into end-to-end, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete where this says token, but I'm going to make sure to leave a space after bearer and hit paste. So now this basically authorizes ourselves to use Perplexity's endpoint. And now if we look down at the body request, we can see we have this thing set up for us already. So if I hit test step, this is real quick, I'm going to make a request over. It just hit Perplexity's endpoint, and as you can see, it came back with data. And what this did is it basically searched Perplexity for how many stars are there in our galaxy. And that's right here we can see the Milky Way galaxy, which is our galaxy, is estimated to contain between 100 billion and 400 billion stars, blah, blah, blah. So we know
that's so cool. It just all clicked for me right now.
Basically, okay, if we want to change how this endpoint works, what data we're going to get back, this right here is where we would change our request. If we go back into the documentation, we can see what else we have to set up. So the first thing to notice is that there's a few things that are required, and then some things that are not. So right here we have authorization that's always required. The model is always required. Like which Perplexity model are we going to use? The messages are always required, so this is basically a mix of a system message and a user message. So here the example is be precise and concise, and then the user message is how many stars are there in the galaxy. So if I came back here and I said, be funny in your answer. So I'm basically telling this model how to act. And then instead of how many stars are there in the galaxy, I'm just going to say, how long do cows live? And I'll make another in your answer. The example is be precise and concise, and then the user message is how many stars are there in the galaxy. So if I came back here and I said, be funny in your answer. So I'm basically telling this model how to act. And then instead of how many stars are there in the galaxy, I'm just going to say, how long do cows live? And I'll make another request off to Perplexity. So you can see what comes back is this longer content. So it's not being precise and concise. And it says, so you're wondering how long cows live? Well, let's move into the details. So as you can see, it's funny. Okay, back in the API documentation, we have a few other things that we could configure, but notice how these aren't required the same way that these ones are. So we have max tokens. We could basically put in an integer and say, how many tokens do you want to use at the maximum? We can change the temperature, which is, like how random the response would be. And this one says, it has to be between 0 and 2. And as we keep scrolling down, you can see that there's a ton of other little levers that we can just tweak a little bit to change the type of response that we get back from Perplexity. And so once you start to read more and more API documentation, you can understand how you're really in control of what you get back from the server. And also you can see, sometimes you have to send over booleans, which is basically just...
I am just unbelievably distracted, but I just need to know this. Can you watch a full-length YouTube video on a live stream on YouTube? Where is it copyright? I just need to know. Because this stream could not be up for all I know. YouTube will interrupt or terminate live streams that show copyrighted content. You can't stream a full-length YouTube video or movie on YouTube unless you own or have license right. Well, okay, good to know. This was a test live stream anyways, so all good either way. Just keep on rolling. Maybe it didn't.
True or false. Sometimes you can only send over numbers. Sometimes you can only send over strings. And sometimes it'll tell you, what will this value default to? And also, what are the only accepted values that you actually could fill out? So for example, if we go back to this temperature setting, we can see it has to be a number. And if you don't fill that out, it's going to be 0.2. We can also see that if you do fill this out, it has to be between 0 or 2. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Okay, cool. So that's basically how it works. We just set up an HTTP request and we change the system prompt and we change the user prompt. And that's how we can customize this thing to work for us. And that's really cool as a node because we can set up, workflow to pass over some sort of variable into this request. So it searches the web for something different every time. But now let's say we want to give our agent access to this tool and the agent will decide what am I going to search the web for based on what the human asks me. So it's pretty much the exact same process. We'll click on add a tool and we're going to add an HTTP request tool only because Perplexity doesn't have a native integration. And then once again, you can see we have an import curl button. So if I click on this and I just import that same curl that we did last time, once again, it fills out this whole thing for us. So we have post, we have the Perplexity endpoint, we have our authorization bearer, but notice we have to put in our token once again. And so a cool little hack is, let's say you're going to use Perplexity a lot, rather than having to go grab your API key every single time, what we can do is we can just send it over right here in the authentication tab. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I click into authentication, I can click on generic credential type. And then from here, I can basically choose, okay, is this a basic auth, a bearer auth, all this kind of stuff. A lot of times it's just going to be header auth, so that's why we know right here we can click on header auth. And as you can see, we know that because we're sending this over as a header parameter, and we just did this earlier and it worked. So as you can see, I have header auth already set up. I probably already have a Perplexity one set up right here, but I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one with you guys to show you how this works. So I just create a new header auth, and all we have to do is the exact same thing that we had down in the request that we just sent over, which means in the name, we're just going to type in authorization with capital A. And once again, we can see in the API docs, this is how you do it, so authorization. And then we can see that the value has to be capital B bearer space API token. So I'm just going to come to here, bearer space API token, and then all I have to do is, first of all, name this so we can save it. And then if I hit save, now every single time we want to use Perplexity's endpoints, we already have our credentials saved, so that's great. And then we can turn off the headers down here because we don't need to send it over twice. So now all we have to do is change this body request a little bit just to make it more dynamic. So in order to make it dynamic, the first thing we have to do is change this to an expression. Now we can see that we can basically add a variable in here, and what we can do is we can add a variable that basically just tells the AI model, the AI agent, here's where you're going to send over your internet search query. And so we already know that all that is the user content right here. So if I delete this, and basically if I do two curly braces, and then within the curly braces I do a $sign and I type in from, I can grab a from AI function. And this from AI function just indicates to the AI agent, I need to choose something to send over here. And you guys
It's like just one giant communication strategy with AI and data.
See an example, it will make more sense. I also did a full video breaking this down, so if you want to see that, I'll tag it right up here. Anyways, as you can see, all we have to really do is enter in a key. So I'm just going to do, two quotes, and within the quote, I'm going to put in search term. And so now the agent will be reading this and say, okay, whenever the user interacts with me, and I know I need to search the internet, I'm just going to fill this whole thing in with the search term. So now that that's set up, I'm just going to change this request to, actually I'm just going to call it web search to make that super intuitive for the AI agent. And now what we're going to do is we are going to talk to the agent and see if it can actually search the web. Okay, so I'm asking the AI agent to search the web for the best movies. It's going to think about it, it's going to use this tool right here, and then we'll basically get to go in there and we can see what it filled in that search term placeholder that we gave it. So first of all, the answer it gave us was IMDb, top 250, Rotten Tomatoes, all this kind of stuff, right? So that's movie information that we just got from Perplexity. And what I can do is click into the tool, and we can see in the top left, it filled out search term with best movies. And we can even see that in action. If we come down to the body request that it sent over and we expand this, we can see on the right-hand side in the result panel, this is the JSON body that it sent over to Perplexity, and it filled it in with best movies. And then, of course, what we got back was our content from Perplexity, which is, here are some of the best movies across major platforms. All right, and real quick, before we wrap up here, I just want to talk about some common responses that you can get from your HTTP requests. So the rule of thumb to follow is if you get data back and you get 200, you're good. Sometimes you'll get a response back, but you won't explicitly see a 200 message. But if you're getting the data back, then you're good to go. And a quick example of this is down here, we have that HTTP request, which we went over earlier in this video, where we went to open Weather Maps API. And you can see down here, we got code 200, and there's data coming back, and 200 is good. That's a success code. Now, if you get a request in the 400s, that means that you probably set up the request wrong. So 400 bad request, that could mean that your JSON's invalid. It could just mean that you have like an extra quotation mark or you have, an extra comma, something as silly as that. So let me show a quick example of that. We're gonna test this workflow, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to send over a query to Tably, and you can see what we get is an error that says JSON parameter needs to be valid JSON, and this would be a 400 error. And the issue here is if we go into the JSON body that we're trying to send over, you can see in the result panel, we're trying to send over a query that has basically two sets of quotation marks, if you can see that. But here's the great news about JSON. It is so universally used and been around for so long that we can basically just copy the result over to ChatGPT, paste it in here, and say, I'm getting an error message that says JSON parameter needs to be valid JSON. What's wrong with my JSON? As you can see, it says the issue with your JSON is the use of double quotes around the string value in this line. So now we'd be able to go fix that. If we go back into the workflow, we take away these double quotes right here, test the step again. Now you can see it's spinning and it's going to work, and we should get back some information about pineapples on pizza. Another common error you could run into is a 401, meaning unauthorized. This typically just means that your API key is wrong. You can also get a 403, which is forbidden. That just means that maybe your account doesn't have access to this data that you're requesting or something like that. And then another one you get is a 404, which sometimes you'll get that if you type in a URL that doesn't exist. It just means this doesn't exist. We can't find it. And a lot of times when you're looking at the actual API documentation that you want to set up a request to, so here's an example with Tably, it'll show you what typical response could look like. So here's one where we're using Tably to search for who's Leo Messi. This was an example we looked at earlier. And with a 200 response, we are getting back like a query, an answer, results, stuff like that. We could also see we could get a 400, which would be for bad request, invalid topic. We could have a 401, which means invalid API key. We could get all these other ones like 429, 432, but in general, 400 is bad. And then even worse is a 500. And this just basically means something's wrong with the server. Maybe it doesn't exist anymore, or there's a bug on the server side. But the good news about 500 is it's not your fault. You didn't set up the request wrong. It just means something's wrong with the server. And it's really important to know that, because if you think you did something wrong, but it's really not your fault at all, you may be banging your head against the wall for hours. So anyways, what I want to highlight here is there's never just like a one size fits all. I know how to set up this one API call, so I can just set up every single other API call the exact same way. The key is to really understand how do you read the API documentation, how do you set up your body parameters and your different header parameters, and then if you start to run into issues, the key is understanding and actually reading the error message that you're getting back and adjusting from there. All right, so that's gonna do it for this video. Hopefully this has left you feeling a lot more comfortable with diving into API documentation, walking through it just step by step, using those curl commands, and really just understanding all I'm doing is I'm setting up filters and levers here. I don't have to get super confused. It's really not that technical. I'm pretty much in complete control over what my API is gonna send me back. The same way I'm in complete control when I'm ordering something on DoorDash or ordering something on Amazon, whatever it is. And if you want to dive even deeper into APIs and HTTP requests, or if you want to be able to have some tech support whenever you want, then definitely check out my paid community. Link for that.
Yeah, that was a good video. I think I got the gist. I'm gonna probably do better with like real-time application. But I think I got the gist. Like the sense of everything is totally there.
This is how to set up your Google credentials in under 5 minutes so that you...
All right, so that's probably where I'm gonna stop for now. Just because I'm gonna probably show a little of personal data. So like I want to just kind of keep this whole stream kind of brief and short. This was just a test for the introduction. So the fact if this all worked and is still up, then it was meant to be. If not, it's all good. I was planning to jump into tomorrow's session, me just live streaming, building the whole agent with, Nate being the instructor. Just full take, live, straight shot. So everything should be good. I'm still experimenting with this, and I want to just make sure that, because I don't know how to like blur the API key and all that stuff, but we'll just kind of see how it goes. I'm just trying to break into the whole streaming world of documenting workflows and building stuff and documenting the journey and like all that great stuff. I'm trying to do the YouTube videos and it's just not working. Something about the live stream, it's just so much better. I can be myself. I can like have material in front of me. I can react. I can respond. So something more that I want to do. I was experimenting with vlogs or like talking head, but it's just, I think live streaming is just so much more fun. It's real. It's raw. It's just more fun. So we'll just kind of roll with it. Hopefully this is out there. I have no idea if anybody's even watching this or will ever watch it, but it's pretty cool to be doing it. But yeah, I'm gonna set this up and I will be potentially, depending on like the success of this, maybe I will stream these too. But just setting things up, I have to like figure out how to blur things. And yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll just keep experimenting. But yeah, we'll see just how this went, and then if I need to redo it, then I'll start with these and then recap what I learned. But either way, I will be doing like the whole live class build in real time. So, all right, guys, that is the first stream, a success. So we will see you. I don't plan on stopping doing this. It's like a 2-week challenge. So for the next 2 weeks, I'm pretty much anytime that I'm learning or building, I'm going to try to capture it all the way through. So follow along. I think it's going to be good. You guys are going to learn a lot right there with me from somebody who had no idea what an API key was, or HTTP, I don't even know, HTTP, JSON, all this great stuff. I'm learning in real time publicly as time goes. So follow along. There will be plenty more videos to come. And I'm sure once all of my knowledge crystallizes and I have a thorough understanding of this stuff, I will confidently be making more videos as I learn on a live stream. So, okay guys, see you